What's going on, guys? Manny here at Yellow Tape DFS, here to give you my take of the NFL Week 5 main slate. Before we get started like normal, I want to give a special thanks and shout out to our new sponsor, Ready Game Begin. You can go ahead and visit their Facebook page and smash that like button. Visit their website and check out what they're about. And if you happen to ever be in the Orlando area and stop by their facility, you can use Yellow Tape DFS as a promo code on discounted rates for their services. Now, while we're talking about smashing like buttons, please sit there and give this one a like. Give me a comment. Tell me something you liked, something you didn't like, something that needs improvement. All constructive criticism is welcomed. Also, I'm trying to get the first goal of reaching 100 subscribers. So if you guys help me get to that goal, we'll be doing our first giveaway. Keep that in mind. Starting off the video like normal, we're going to go over implied totals. So we have the Ravens at the Steelers at an implied total of 44. The Jags and the Panthers at 40. The Bills and the Texans at 38.5. The Bears and the Raiders at 40.5. The Bucks and the Saints at 45.5. The Falcons and the Texans at 50. The Patriots and the Redskins at 42. The Cardinals and the Bengals at 47.5. The Jets and the Eagles at 43.5. The Vikings and Giants at 43.5. The Broncos and the Chargers at 44.5. And the Packers and the Cowboys at 46.5. So we can see that some of these games have a much higher implied point total than the rest. Taking that in consideration, let's take a look at players by position. At quarterback, Lamar Jackson is at the top salary at $7,100. Rightfully so. He always has a high floor just due to rushing. He's going against Pittsburgh, who's been pretty bad this year. Seems fine. I mean, I'm personally not going to be paying up at quarterback in a cash line. But in GPPs, this guy is always in play because he can have a breakout game at any time. Deshaun Watson is getting a lot of hype this week. Rightfully so, with the highest implied game total. He has the rushing floor. He's up in a decent spot for the position. Everybody's tooting him, and I can see why. It's not a problem. Tom Brady, he's in a great spot. I'm not necessarily certain how much offensive production they're going to need. I think their defense is just going to smash this team, but that's me personally. Kyler Murray against the Bengals, great spot, smash spot. It really boils down to if they take the lead in an obscure amount in rapid succession, right? Because then it would just lead for more rushing yards as far as carries instead of targets in the air. Jameis Winston against New Orleans. This could be cute. Okay, this guy just went out and threw a whopper against the Rams. Maybe he's on a roll. I mean, we know Jameis is inconsistent, but this could be another great game for him. We know that Lattimore is going to be covering their best guy, and who really is their best guy? Is it Evans or is it Godwin? I guess that's something we'll have to pay attention to in coverage. All right, moving along. Carson Wentz. Going against the Jets. It's in a fine spot. Numbers are really liking Carson Wentz in this spot. Like, statistics are showing that he's a really good play this week. That's it's odd. I don't know. I feel like that he could produce against the Jets. That's not an issue that I'm having. But if we go $100 less and go to the next guy on the slate, Aaron Rodgers. I happen to think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be someone I have a lot of interest in this week. They have the second highest implied point total, I believe, on the slate. Going against Dallas, I feel like the game script is going to be that they are behind, especially if Adams is not in for the turf toe. And I feel like they're just going to have to air the ball out. He's going to have to use targets like MVS, Allison, and definitely Jimmy Graham in this matchup. Dallas struggles with tight ends. We'll get to that later. And I just think that he's going to have to put in work in order to stay afloat against this Dallas offense. Like, just to keep coming back and forth with the point score. On the opposite side, Dak Prescott. I'm not really too much favoring him today for this week. It's more so Zeke, right? Like, we'll get to that later. Matt Ryan, once again, he's definitely in play. That game is the highest implied total. I have to play players on both sides. Andy Dalton, if he can do something, it has to be this game. Okay, they're playing against the Cardinals. They're allowing a lot of yards through the air. I see this being his potential to have a game. If it's not, then just count the Bengals out every week. It's kind of disgusting. Sam Darnold just got ruled out, so Falk will be assuming the starting position. I might have some exposure to him honestly because they Philly gives up a lot of yards in the air, so it's going to be a decent matchup. And at that low rate of 4,900, I can't pass that up in tournament plays. Teddy Bridgewater, also another guy I'm going to be targeting in tournament plays because Tampa just doesn't have the greatest defense. They did have some good defensive plays against the Rams last week, but nothing is telling me to be scared of the Bucs defense. Kyle Allen against the Jags could be interesting as well. Anybody else that I'm thinking about? Maybe if I want to pay even further down, the last option for me would be Joe Flacco against the Chargers. Sutton and Sanders have been doing pretty well for him this season. And I think this week that he will be in a decent spot to go ahead and produce at 4,700. He may be in a good spot to get value out of his price tag. I don't see why not. Moving along to running backs. We have number one. These guys in play every week. They're going against Jacksonville. I don't think that the matchup here matters at all, honestly. It's McCaffrey. He gets a million touches. He produces. He's a freak of nature. That guy's in play every week. Kamara against the Bucs. That's iffy. The Bucs has got pretty good defense against the run, but it's also Kamara, so you have to have exposure to this guy. Dalvin Cook, he scored a touchdown every game this season. Cannot count this guy out. He scored against the Bears, so going against the Giants here does not seem like he's in a bad matchup. Let's keep that very clear. Zeke, smash spot against Green Bay. I don't think there's more to say. And smash spot as well. Don't think I need to say much. Moving down just a little further, Melvin Gordon, Eckler, those guys are really close in price tag. They're in a great spot, but who's getting the touches? Who's getting most of the play? Is the snap percentage going to be evenly distributed? This is a scary place to be in daily fantasy sports because no one truly knows. So that might make that an easier fade or little exposure. Moving further down, Leonard Fournette just came off of a 200-plus yard game. He's going against Carolina. That guy's in play again. I like him. Aaron Jones. We're going to have to stop and mention on this guy. I know he's up and down his play, but he has good history against Dallas at roughly 125 yards a game every time they face each other. I'm going to have exposure to him against Dallas. Sonny Michel at 5,500. Washington is terrible. I feel like Belichick's just going to want to run the ball after their defense puts a whooping on them. And at 5,500, I believe that's too cheap for the production that Michel can have. So this guy's in play for me this week as well. Moving further down, if we want any cheap backs, I literally would only choose two, and they would be Pollard at 4,400, the backup to Zeke. I just feel like if they get... And that would be the same for Chase Edmonds against the Bengals, back up to David Johnson at 3,700. I feel like he'll get an increased role too because if the Bengals play anything like they did the previous weeks, it's going to be a catastrophe, and he's just going to get an increased run. Moving along to wide receivers. Top two guys on the list are DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones. They are facing off against each other in the highest implied total. They are in play. Okay. Now, further down, Adams is questionable. They can pass the ball to, so he has to be in play almost every week against Denver. Denver's got actually decent defense for their secondary. Mike Evans and Godwin. I have to have exposure to both of these guys because I don't know who Lattimore is covering, but I do feel whoever he is not covering is going to have a monster game. So I'm going to have exposure to both of these guys because we don't know what the Saints coaching strategy is going to be. Thielen against the Giants. He's the bigger of the two receivers in Minnesota. I know Minnesota's been a run-heavy team and not too much in the pass game, but after Diggs, complaining about the pass, maybe Kirk Cousins comes out and throws some extra passes. I do know that when Tampa played the Giants, Mike Evans thrived because their secondary is kind of on the smaller side. So if I'm playing one of the receivers there, it's going to be Thielen. He's the larger of the two. At 6,700 is fine. Next guy on the list, Michael Thomas against Tampa, 6,600. This guy is just way underpriced. I understand Brees is not on the field, but he's still getting his target share with Bridgewater out there. Sign me up. Josh Gordon against Washington. Washington struggles to guys that spread the field. Okay, we saw it happen. I believe it was week 1 against Deshaun Jackson. That guy put the Rockets on his feet and took off. Okay, Josh Gordon, the same spot. I'm after this guy this week, even though he has a questionable tag, so be careful on that. But I'm sure it's just a precautionary measure. Scantling, he's going to have to be in play, especially if Adams out. Same thing with Allison. We'll continue. We'll get talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Emmanuel Sanders and Sutton, those guys are both in for me. Like I said, I kind of like Flacco this week at 4,700. I'm playing both the receivers. Golden Tate is reinstated. He is off of suspension. He's only $4,600 for the Giants. He may be a really interesting play. One of my favorite plays for that Atlanta-Houston game will be Will Fuller. He spreads the field. Atlanta also suffers to the same type of receivers that spread the field. He's at 4,500. I think this is a great play. Robbie Anderson, I loved if Dalton was playing. But being that it is Falk that is going to be running the QB, I'm going to lower the percentage of exposure I have to this guy, but he is also in a great spot. But I will say that Falk was starting to target this guy Berrios, who is a measly 3,000 flat on DraftKings. Okay, so have some exposure to that guy. I'm not saying to play him a ton, but he's 3,000 flat. It's going to be production. Moving further down, under 4,000, I have interest in very few players. Auden Tate at 3,500 with John Ross out and A.J. Green still out. This guy was getting 6 targets in the last game while Ross was in. I only see that target share increasing without Ross, so that's something to look at. On Arizona's receiving core, they have Fitzgerald because Kirk is out, and I believe Bird is going to be out again, so Keyshawn Johnson at 3,500 was also another guy to look at. Moving along to tight ends. Top of the list, you got Zach Ertz. Okay, 6,000. The Jets haven't really given up too much to tight ends this year, but it's Zach Ertz, so I can never count him out. Ingram against Minnesota is in a fine spot. Same thing with Waller against Chicago. I'm liking Mark Andrews against Pittsburgh. He's got a questionable tag, but he's been like that for the last 2-3 weeks. It's probably due to recovery, nothing major. But keep an eye on that just in case. Austin Hooper's been pretty under the radar, but scoring almost every week. This guy, you need to have him in a couple lineups. Just have some exposure. My favorite tight end of this week is between 2 players. Okay, Jimmy Graham, with the assumption that Adams is not playing at 4,300. Dallas has always struggled with tight ends, and that trend is still there. And then further down the list, at 3,300, we have Tyler Eifert going against the Cardinals, who are the worst against tight ends. Now, I know Eifert's production has been bare bones, like 5 targets, not too many receptions out of those 5. But if any spot for him to flourish, it is this one, okay? And one more honorable mention at tight ends for $100 more is Jared Cook against Tampa. I think that when you have not your starting quarterback in play, that the running backs and tight ends get a larger bulk load of the work because they are the quickest person to dump the ball off to. So I do like Cook in a favorable matchup against the Bucs. Moving along to defense, they just look immaculate. Okay, nothing else to say. I'm not a Patriots fan by any means. I'm a Giants fan. but their defense is insane. The Bears. I think the Bears are going to have a great week against Oakland, especially with Khalil Mack with some revenge narrative. Go ahead and have some exposure to that. If you want to pay down on defense, I do not mind in playing the Buccaneers against Teddy Bridgewater. I think that their defense showed that they have playmaking abilities last week, and they've been getting a decent amount of sacks week in and week out. Okay, at 2,200, it's a decent defense to pay down to. The same thing with the Steelers. We saw what they did to the Bengals. They're up against Baltimore, and they just got shredded by Cleveland. So if their morale is not back where it needs to be, the Steelers could be in the Ravens, depending on where they're at mentally, physically, injury-wise. That's another team to look out for on defense at 2,100. Redskins are 1,800. This is a sole GPP play if you decide to choose to play the lowest price defense. But I don't hate the idea. I know it's been successful on Yahoo where they can pay down to the lowest defense. So I'm never opposed to the idea of trying to roster the higher tier guys by going down in one area, and that would be fine. All right, so that has been my take. If you guys please stop by the Facebook group, Yellow Tape DFS. If you're not a member already, go ahead and join it. I will be posting a condensed player pool the closer we get to lock. I hope this video helps you guys. Have a good one. Let's get in the green.